now move to question time, and I am calling Senator Chandler.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Gallagher. Media reporting yesterday revealed that Layla Khaled, a pro-Palestinian terrorist who hijacked 2 planes and is an active member of a terrorist organisation, is planning to come to Australia to speak at a socialist conference in Perth later this year. Will the Albanese government commit to ruling out any prospect of this radical terrorist being granted a visa to Australia?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Chandler for the question. And I would say that I strongly and the government strongly condemns anyone who incites violence and hatred in our community. Someone like that is not welcome in our country. It is my understanding that no visa application has been made at this time. However, I'd like to be very clear that anyone with this history will not be allowed into Australia. We take the safety of the Australian community very seriously, and that is the information that I have to date.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Chandler, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine is a sanctioned entity in Australia and has been designated a terrorist organisation by multiple countries, including the United States, Canada and Japan. Will the government consider listing this violent group as a terrorist organisation in Australia?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Chandler for the supplementary. Well, we always take the advice of our security agencies on these matters. As you know, they go through a process in relation to this. I believe it also involves the Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence and Security to some degree, or consultation, but that is the position the government takes. We take the role of keeping, or the objective of keeping Australia safe very seriously. We listen to our security agencies, we take their advice, and when we get that advice, we act on it. And I would expect that that would be the way that you would have operated in government as well.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Chandler, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. In a letter to the government, the Executive Council of Australian Jewry raised concerns that Layla Khaled's appearance would aggravate current social divisions and thus cause damage to social cohesion. This comes after the Department of Home Affairs revealed at Senate estimates that while the government has allocated funding to combat Islamophobia, there is no equivalent program to address anti-Semitism. Will the government commit to taking urgent action to address the crisis of anti-Semitism in Australia and support our Jewish communities at their time of greatest need?
Thank you, Senator Chandler. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Chandler for the question. And the government condemns anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and we have been doing everything that we can, particularly with heightened tensions in the Middle East, to make sure that we are doing whatever we can to keep communities safe and to keep the community united. And that is, I think, something that we have taken very seriously. We understand across different communities, and we understand there has been an increase in anti-Semitism in this country. We oppose it, we reject it, we do stand with the Jewish community across Australia. We also understand that because of the tensions in the Middle East, that Muslim Australians, that Australians from Palestine have also been experiencing increased tension and Islamophobia. And again, I would say—
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Just before I call Senator Marielle Smith, I draw to the attention of honourable senators the presence in the chamber of a parliamentary delegation from the Republic of Fiji, led by the Honourable Speaker. On behalf of all senators, I wish you a warm welcome to Australia and in particular to the Senate. Senator Marielle Smith.
Thanks, President. My question's to the Minister for Women, Senator Gallagher. Today, the Albanese government delivered on an election promise and published the individual gender pay gaps at Australia's largest employers. This step builds on the government's commitment to close the gender pay gap and to lift women's economic equality. Could the minister outline the findings of today's landmark data release and how shining a light helps to shift the dial when it comes to closing the gender pay gap?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Marielle Smith, Senator Marielle Smith, for her
all of the above.
all of those, tick, and for the incredible job she does on behalf of the people of South Australia, but also when it comes to gender equality and advocating for policies that support gender equality. And I would also like to acknowledge Ms Mary Woolridge in the chamber today and her team from WGEA for the hard work that they've done to get us to this point today. And I would like to acknowledge the effort that has gone into raising awareness and publicity of this important release today. WGEA first published national gender pay gap data in 2014, and it is fitting that 10 years later we've reached the point of publishing employer-level data. Publishing the gender pay gaps of big employers was a commitment we took to the last election, as Senator Smith outlined. We brought that reform to the parliament a year ago, and now today we're taking the crucial step towards fairness in Australian workplaces. This is an Australian first, and there are a lot of takeaways from the data released today. We can see a median gender pay gap of 19% when it comes to total remuneration, and that's equivalent to over $18,000 per year. 30% of Australian employers have a gender pay gap of within 5% of zero, which is very promising, but around 2/3 of employers, or just over 60%, have a gender pay gap above that, which means the majority of Australian workplaces have work to do to close their gender pay gap. In every industry in Australia, the median of what a woman is paid is less than the median of what a man is paid. And by exposing these pay gaps and sharing this data, shining some light on it, we're giving power to both employees and employers to drive real change.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Marielle Smith, first supplementary.
Minister, this is the first time that this has been released publicly in a way that measures the individual businesses' gender pay gaps. How will this reform help to close the gender pay gap faster, and how will closing the gender pay gap deliver better outcomes for women?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, and I thank Senator Smith for the supplementary. Well, the data today shows that the median gender pay gap is equivalent to $18,000 or just over $18,000 a year. If you're a woman working in a male-dominated industry, the median pay gap is over $27,000, and if you work in construction, the median gap is over $38,000. With this data, businesses and workers are armed with powerful information about where employers need to focus their efforts. They may focus on recruitment and promotion, or addressing industry and occupation gender segregation, which is a big problem in this country. They may also look at workplace flexibility and the structure of bonuses. And this is something the government looks forward to continuing to work with businesses and WGEA to make sure we are closing the gender pay gap, because at the pace we're going now, it'll take another quarter of a century to close that gap, and we think that is too long.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Smith, second supplementary.
The government's reform that led to the release of this landmark data is already sparking a national conversation and building on a strong agenda for women. Can the minister outline what the government is doing to support gender equality at work and beyond to achieve better outcomes for women across Australia?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President, and Senator Smith for the question. We've made it clear that addressing gender equality and driving greater economic independence and economic equality for women is a key priority for this government, and we have a national strategy on gender equality on the eve of International Women's Day next week. But the conversation that the WGEA report has started is welcome. There has been a lot of engagement on this today. We think it is a positive story, not a negative one. It's a shame Senator Canavan isn't here, because I noticed he said it was the worst the worst collection of data that any government could ever do, and I don't think Senator Hughes is a fan either. But this is important data. This is important data that will help drive change across the economy, and it'll make sure that women get a better deal when it comes to workplace equality.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Nampijinka-Price.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Gallagher. Does the Prime Minister agree with Labor's candidate in the seat of Dunkley that the referendum result was a display of the worst white privilege in the country?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinka-Price. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Nampijinpa for the price. I haven't seen those comments, but I think the Prime Minister has made it very clear that we accept the Australian population's or the voters' decision on the referendum. It wasn't a position we argued for. We supported a voice to Parliament. I think it was unfortunate that it got so political, and contested.
Order.
But we accept the outcome of the referendum, and we are focused on making a practical difference for First Nations people in this country. That is the Prime Minister's focus. That is the Minister for Indigenous Affairs' focus. For my colleague Senator McCarthy and for all of us, we are focused on jobs, on housing, on education, on community support, on making a difference, because I think we all accept in this chamber that the information that was released in Closing the Gap shows that we have a long way to go to meet the needs and support Indigenous communities across this country. That is the focus of this government. I would also say that the candidate for Dunkley is an excellent candidate for the Labor Party. She's been a strong advocate for women in her electorate. She was recruited by Peter Murphy, the late Peter Murphy, member for Dunkley, because she saw the qualities that Ms Bellier will make in this parliament, the difference that she will make. We stand by her, we support her. I have no doubt she'll be an excellent member for Dunkley. I haven't seen the comments that Senator Nampijinpa Price refers to, but I again refer the senator to the work the government is doing and the position the Prime Minister took post the election.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Nampijinpa Price, first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Does the Prime Minister believe the 56,000 voters in Dunkley who voted no were motivated by white privilege?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinpa Price. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. Well, again, my answer is the same. We accept the outcome of the referendum. We accept that a majority of Australians did not support the question that was put to them, and the government remains focused on the work at hand, the serious work at hand. I know you'd like to try and create more division and more disharmony, and that is the go-to of the opposition. You've never seen an issue that you don't want to then have a crack on and oppose. We are focused on making a difference for the lives of First Nations people. The sobering Closing the Gap report that has been recently released should refocus all of our attention on the gaps that exist and the work that needs to happen, whether it be on ensuring quality, secure jobs, on whether it's about delivering housing into communities where they're needed, in supporting children to go to school and get the education they need. That is the focus of this government.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Nampijinpa Price, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Does the Prime Minister believe Ms Bellier's comments regarding the motives of no voters are reflective of the community she is seeking to represent?
Thank you, Senator Nampijinpa Price. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, Senator McCarthy. I've answered that question. The Prime Minister has been clear. Post the referendum, we accept the result of the referendum. The focus of the government, as it has been since day one, we have been focused on supporting programs, including community-led programs, to close the gap. I know you want to talk about everything else. You can keep screaming at me, Senator Rennick. Keep screaming at me. The issue here is about closing the gap for Indigenous Australians. That is what we are focused on.
Please resume your seat. I have called order 2 or 3 times. Senator Rennick, you are out of order and being disrespectful. When I call order, it includes you. Senator Rennick.
Point of order, Chair. She wasn't answering the question.
That is not a point of order. The minister is being relevant. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. I have answered the question. You don't like the answer, Senator Rennick. They are two different things. But the Prime Minister has made it clear the work we are doing in government is to deal with closing the gap in those areas, those priority areas that we are focused on, that the Minister for Indigenous Affairs is leading, ably supported by every single one of us in this caucus who wants to make a difference and close the gap, not talk about everything else.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Waters.
Thanks very much, President. And my question's for the Minister for Finance and Women, Senator Gallagher. Today's release of employer-level gender pay gap data by the excellent WGEA is a move that the Greens have long called for, but the results are shocking. Employers should be embarrassed into fixing their gender pay gap, but there is a role for government here too. Many of the employers today reporting enormous gender pay gaps receive large government grants. For example, climate wrecker Santos has a median gender pay gap of 24.7%, and in 2021 the government awarded Santos a $16.5 million grant for its Moomba carbon capture and storage project. Minister, how many of the companies reporting a gender pay gap today receive government grants, and will the government stop subsidising discrimination by not giving grants to employers with gender pay gaps?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Waters for the question. I also acknowledge the work that she's done around gender equality more broadly and the advocacy that she has made for many years in this area. In terms of Senator Waters' questions, the focus of the release of this data today has not been to name and shame, to individually single out particular businesses, but it's to be shining a light. And today's discussion, indeed the coverage we've had today, the interest we've had today, the discussions that have been had today, totally endorse the approach we've taken, which is that raising awareness will force the change to happen, because companies will be wanting to know why these gaps exist, what they can do about it, and generating the change that needs to happen. That is why we've released these reports, to link it to government grants. And there is currently arrangements through our procurement processes if people don't engage, if companies don't engage with WGEA, that exists to ensure that they don't, over a certain limit, that they don't have access to government work. And the issue more broadly about procurement is something that is before me more generally, looking at ways that we can drive ethical procurement, support ethical procurement through our government processes. We are a big purchaser of supplies and services, and it's only right that we should be looking at all aspects of that to make sure that government is showing leadership in this area. But I would just say that the purpose of today, the work that Ms Woolridge and her formidable team have done at WGEA, is not about naming and shaming. It's about driving change in a faster way than we've seen, and encouraging businesses to understand what their current operations are and how to improve them.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Waters, first supplementary.
Thanks very much, President. The government's procurement principles only require that companies report on their gender pay gap, not that they seek to close it. Minister, how many of the companies reporting a gender pay gap today receive government contracts? And will the government stop subsidising discrimination by not giving government contracts, as opposed to grants, to employers with gender pay gaps?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And I welcome the fact that we're discussing this again. I think it's endorsing the approach that publishing this data is generating the conversations that will drive the change. But we have not used the data from WGEA, nor were businesses, who engaged with this willingly told that this data would then be used to stop something else. This is about reporting the current situation, what it is, and encouraging change. And part of those changes which this parliament supported was that reports need to be provided to the board, for example, so that board is aware of what's happening in the business's operations. But on the issue of procurement more generally, as I said in my first answer, I am working with finance on this issue through the Buy Australian plan and other work that we're doing to make sure that government, as a purchaser, is leading the way in delivering good, strong social and ethical outcomes.
Senator Waters, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. The big banks, who donated over $260,000 to Labor in the last financial year, all pay men significantly more than women. Commonwealth Bank has the highest gender pay gap of the Big Four at around 30%. Will the government commit to stop accepting political donations from employers with large gender pay gaps?
Sorry. Just a moment, Minister. So the clerk has advised me it is not a relevant question for the minister, but obviously you're free to answer in whatever way you choose to, Minister.
Thank you. Well, I was going to say there isn't a subject or topic that the Greens can't somehow link to political donations in this country, despite no evidence, despite not being able to provide any evidence at all, other than trying to besmirch political opponents. So let's just see this for what it is. In relation, if I take the issue of financial services seriously, around gender pay gaps in financial services, there are some in financial services that have managed to have a neutral gender pay gap. There are others that have a large gender pay gap, and the issue around this data is that by publishing it, we've been able to identify that, and hopefully those companies where there are large gender pay gaps in favour of men, that they will make the steps that they need to take to close that gender pay gap and to close it faster than has currently been occurring in previous years.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Urquhart.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government, Minister Watt. At the last election, Labor promised to help more Australians access safe and affordable housing. I regularly hear from constituents in my home state of Tasmania, particularly those living in regional areas, who want to own their own home. How is the Albanese government's ambitious housing agenda helping Australians living in regional areas buy their first home, and how successful these policies have been?
Thank you, Senator Urquhart. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Urquhart for her question and her interest in wanting to see more regional Australians own their own home. The Albanese Labor government understands the importance of home ownership and the unique challenges of our regions, which is why we took to the election a commitment to establish a regional first home buyer guarantee to support eligible regional Australians to buy a home with as little as a 5% deposit. And I know the Liberals and the Nationals hate hearing about a Labor government delivering to the regions. They hate it. This commitment from Labor was delivered 3 months ahead of schedule. The Albanese Labor government has also expanded eligibility of the Home Guarantee Scheme to help more Australians into home ownership. Since July last year, the First Home Guarantee and Regional First Home Buyer Guarantee have been open to joint applications with friends and family members, not just single, married or de facto applicants. The Family Home Guarantee has been expanded from single, natural or adoptive parents with dependents to eligible borrowers who are single legal guardians of children, such as aunts, uncles and grandparents. I'm pleased to update the Senate that the Albanese Labor government's expanded Home Guarantee Scheme has now supported over 100,000 people into home ownership since the election. More than 100,000 people assisted into home ownership by the Albanese Labor government since the election. And Senator Urquhart, I'm pleased to tell you that that includes 1,300 people in your home state of Tasmania, spread right across the state. Of those successful new— oh, is that all? Was that Senator Henderson who said that all? Is that— Senator Henderson doesn't think it's a good thing that we've assisted 1,300 people in Tasmania into home ownership. Senator Urquhart, very interesting. And of those successful new homeowners, there were 632 in Hobart, 260 in Launceston and North East Tasmania, 28 in South East Tasmania and 380 in West and North West Tasmania.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Urquhart for supplementary.
Thank you. After a wasted decade under the Liberals and Nationals, it's great to see the Albanese government showing national leadership and offering support to make sure Australians in regional communities have opportunities for home ownership. Something wasn't given over there. In August last year, the government announced its Help to Buy scheme. Minister, can you please update the Senate about how the Albanese government's significant investments into the Help to Buy scheme and how it will bring home ownership back into reach for more Australians, particularly Tasmanians looking to purchase a home?
Thank you, Senator Urquhart. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Urquhart. Well, I'm pleased to say that Labor's Help to Buy shared equity program will provide a pathway to home ownership for people who have been locked out. Eligible participants will only need a 2% deposit for Help to Buy, and the government will support them with an equity stake of up to 40% for new homes and up to 30% for existing homes. In Tasmania, this could mean assistance of up to $240,000 on a new home in Hobart and similar amounts around the state. Now, I'm not surprised that Mr Dutton and the Coalition have said no to this program, because that's what they always say. But I was surprised to see the Greens political party yet again say no to helping Australians buy their own home, especially when so many have had taxpayers help them buy their own homes, like Senator McKim and Senator Faruqi, who each own 4 homes, or Senator Ormond-Payne, who owns 2 homes. Labor wants to help young Australians buy just 1 home. The Greens should stop voting with Peter Dutton to block more housing.
Thank you, Senator Watt. And Senator Watt, when referring to members of the other— Senator Watt, I'm addressing you. I asked you yesterday and I'll ask you again today, when addressing members of the other House, to use their correct title. Senator Urquhart, first supplementary.
Last week we heard the Greens housing spokesperson and member for Griffiths, Max Chandler Mather, state, and I quote, "We have enough homes for people to live in." But that's not what I'm hearing from my constituents. What are the key challenges to delivering the Albanese government's vital assistance to help more regional Australians buy their first home?
Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. Well, we inherited many housing challenges when we came to office, with a big one being the need for more housing supply across the country. But one major housing challenge I didn't expect was the constant politicking from the Greens political party. They have opposed or delayed every single housing measure that we have introduced and criticised every dollar we have invested in affordable housing. Now, the Greens talk a big game about housing while they lead protests around the country to stop the construction of more than 3,200 homes right across the country. The Greens party says they want us to help renters buy a home, but now they block Labor's proposal that is literally called Help to Buy. And in a recent bubbling interview from the ABC Insiders program, their housing spokesperson said, "We have more than enough homes for people to live in," despite experts consistently calling for more supply. So now we know why the Greens keep voting with Mr Dutton to block Labor's plans to build homes. They think we have more than enough homes already.
Has expired. Senator Urquhart, second supplementary. Oh, beg your pardon. Order. Senator McKim. Order. Order. Senator McKenzie. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is for—
Senator Pocock, please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie, I had just called you to order. I invited Senator Pocock to ask his question and you continued to yell across the chamber. Senator Pocock, please start again.
My question is for the Finance Minister. Between January 2018 and the 30th of June 2021, the ANAO reported that the Commonwealth issued some $60.2 billion worth of grants. During this time, we saw taxpayer money go to project after project, not based on the needs of the community, but on purely political marginal seat calculations. Calculations that saw Canberra miss out time and again, from commuter car parks to sports resorts. Does the government believe that legislation is needed to put an end to pork barrelling?
Thank you. Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Pocock for the question and for reminding us about sports resorts, the Building Better Regions Fund, the community car parks, the Urban Congestion Fund, the Safer Communities Fund, the Community Health and Hospitals Program. Do you remember all those funds? Everyone's very quiet over there right now. All of those funds which had very negative audits on in terms of the application and process of decision-making around those.
Order.
In terms of Senator Pocock's question, I think it is incredibly important that the grant guidelines and that the Commonwealth Grants Framework for which grants are administered are very clear about the processes for grants, for grant applications, for decision-making, and I think there should be transparency around those decisions. Currently a function that falls within the Finance Department. I've been working with my department on looking at ways to strengthen the Commonwealth Grants Framework, including enhancements to those rules and guidelines. and I'll have more to say about that soon when that work's complete. I would note that Ms Haynes from the other place has developed private members' legislation, which we'll take through our processes, but the work that I'm currently doing at the moment around integrity, around accountability, around probity and around transparency is by looking at the Commonwealth Grants Framework and the guidelines that are provided to agencies for the administration of grants programs.
Senator David Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Given we saw all the things that you pointed to when there were guidelines and all the rest, in August 2021, you introduced the Public Governance, Performance and Accountability Amendment Bill 2021 to end pork barrelling. We now have Dr Haynes with her own bill. Will you be supporting Dr Haynes's bill to end pork barrelling in Australia?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I should have said Dr Haynes. My apologies in my previous answer. I have answered that question about the approach that I'm taking. I do believe transparency. The bill I introduced when I was in opposition was around the reporting of when ministers make decisions about the awarding of grants in their own areas or their own electorates, and the fact that that had quite a long delay in terms of that information becoming public. I do have a view that we should be providing more frequent reports around that, but tightening up the grants guidelines and the grants framework, working with the JCPAA, which has done quite a lot of work in this regard, and with the work that the ANAO has done in recommendations through theirs, I think is certainly the way through, and I'm doing that work and I'll have more to say about it shortly.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, I'm really concerned that we have a crossbench that stands ready to legislate something, to put something in place when it comes to pork barrelling, and yet we're hearing from the government that it was a massive problem, but just trust us. Trust us, we'll do better. In 2021, you said there is no reasonable argument for any senator in this place, particularly those on the government benches, to oppose this bill. I'm interested if your position has changed, or do we not need to legislate something here?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I think Dr Haynes' bill goes to part of that, but Dr Haynes' bill, from my quick assessment of it, has a number of other elements to it that weren't in the bill that I introduced in opposition. And I've already said in response to my previous answer that I do believe more frequent reporting, where ministers are the decision makers in their own electorates, is important for that. That is a key part of the transparency approach. But I also believe that modernising the grants framework and the guidelines, in accordance with the work that this parliament has done through the Joint Standing Committee on Public Accounts and Audit and the ANAO, is also a meritorious way forward, and that's the approach I've taken. I've been working on this for some time now. We do engage with a lot of grants programs. Many of them are ongoing, and we don't support pork barrelling, and there's ways to improve the current arrangements.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van.
Thank you, President. I direct my question to the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, Senator Watt. Minister, considering the current cost of living crisis affecting Australians, can the Minister explain the rationale behind the government's reasoning for introducing a food tax via the biosecurity levy, which is set to commence on 1 July, and how does the government anticipate this measure will align with broader economic interests and welfare of the Australian people?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. Thanks, Senator Van, for your question regarding a really important issue, which is how the government should fund our biosecurity services moving forward. And Senator Van, I appreciate you having contacted me directly about this issue in general. And you understand, I'm sure, like all of us, that it is vital that a country like Australia maintains strong biosecurity protections. It was only shortly after our government came to office that we faced the risk of foot and mouth disease entering Australia, lumpy skin disease as well, and many other biosecurity threats. And it's only through the hard work of our biosecurity officers in airports, in ports and elsewhere around the country, as well as the great efforts of farmers and others in rural Australia that keep us safe of various diseases. When we came to office, I was pretty horrified to learn that the former government had not built in long-term ongoing funding of our biosecurity protections. In fact, the funding for biosecurity was on track to fall by, from memory, it was around 25%, despite the fact that those threats were increasing. So what the government did at the last budget was significantly increase taxpayer funding for biosecurity protections and also dramatically increase the charges that we were placing on importers for the biosecurity services that we provide, something that the former government had never been prepared to do. The former government said that we needed stronger biosecurity and was not prepared to make importers pay the full cost of those services. Sounds like Senator Hume still has a problem with that. She might like to talk to her National Party colleagues who say that they shouldn't, we shouldn't have done it. When it comes to the levy, what we decided was that given farmers are significant beneficiaries of our biosecurity protections, that it was reasonable to ask them to make a modest contribution towards the cost of those services, which will be 6% of the overall biosecurity funding, with 43% being borne by taxpayers and 48% by importers.
Has expired. Senator Van, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for that answer, and I do agree that biosecurity is incredibly important. Recommendation 35 from Dr Wendy Craik's report, Priorities for Australia's Biosecurity System, calls for an industry stocktake of national biosecurity system investments and to make the results public. Can the Minister justify the new levy without having conducted a formal stocktake of the industry's contributions, and will the government commit to implementing that recommendation?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Van. Well, certainly I'm aware that the Department of Agriculture has undertaken a large amount of work in the biosecurity protection space since that report was delivered by Ms Craik to the former government several years ago. So I would be confident that the work has been done that addresses that recommendation, but I'm obviously happy to go back and have a look at that. What we established was that in the work leading up to the budget was that we did need to lock in ongoing, year-by-year funding for biosecurity in a way that the former government was never prepared to do, so that we could have that certainty around biosecurity funding, and that the cost of providing those services should be shared by the taxpayer generally, by importers, and by asking producers to make a small contribution to the cost of those services. As I say, the overall cost that we will recoup from producers is about $50 million in a budget of several $100 million.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. In last year's budget, the government committed to assess and determine the compatibility of a containerised levy on entities responsible for biosecurity risks with Australia's obligations under the World Trade Organisation. Could the Minister offer an update on the progress of this investigation, and when is completion of this assessment expected?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Van. Again, this issue around a container levy goes back to that report that was delivered by Ms Craik several years ago to the former government. You might remember that at one point the former government promised to introduce a container levy. Then they decided it was all too hard and they scrapped it. And I noticed that now they're promising to bring in a container levy, even though they weren't prepared to do it when they were in office. What we've done instead is focus on the charges that we know we are legally authorised to charge importers by making them pay the full cost of the biosecurity services that we provide. We are continuing to examine a container levy, but as I've previously indicated, there are some World Trade Organisation legal issues that we need to work through to ensure that we can charge a container levy. As soon as that work is completed, I'll of course update the chamber.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell.
President, my question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Defence, Senator Watt. A new $20 million cadet facility in Launceston was promised under the 2017 Launceston City Deal, but 7 years later there's still nothing to show for it, no dirt turned, no tender put out, just crickets. Years of conversations between the Department of Defence, the Tas Liberal government and UTAS show them chasing their tails to complete the necessary land transfer for the projects to get underway. With UTAS being uncooperative and causing delays, the Department of Defence put a deadline of February 29, 2024, which is this Thursday, on the land transfer in a bid to get the project moving at last. Minister, can you confirm if the land transfer will be completed by this Thursday?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Tyrrell, for this question. What I can tell you is that Defence absolutely recognises the importance of this project to the community and is seeking to deliver its commitments. As you're probably aware, Senator Tyrrell, under the Launceston City deal, Defence committed to the divestment of Patterson Barracks with the intention that a new cadet facility could be established within the University of Tasmania Newnham campus. Defence could not complete the planned settlement by July 2022 due to land title issues to be resolved between the Tasmanian Government and the University of Tasmania. Defence has committed resources in the expectation of land being available for development. Defence plans to tender the works package for the facility following completion of land acquisition activities. As you say, or indicated, Senator Tyrrell, that process is still underway. Defence recognises the land title issues are a matter for the Tasmanian Government and the University to resolve. Defence will continue to work closely with all parties to progress its commitment to the City deal, including the divestment of Patterson Barracks. So, Senator Tyrrell, as you would appreciate, not ordinarily being the minister representing, I'm not really across the finer details of this proposal. I'm happy to get some further information for you, but from everything I've just said, it would suggest that it may be difficult to meet that timeline that you're talking about. But as I say, Defence is absolutely committed to this project going ahead and will continue to work closely with all parties to progress its commitment to the City deal, including the divestment of Patterson Barracks.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. An email from Tasmania's Coordinator General suggests Launceston could lose the cadet facility entirely if the land transfer isn't completed soon. If the deadline of February 29th isn't met, will the government walk away from the cadet facility project?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Tyrrell. As you would have seen from the answer to the previous question, there can be no doubting Defence's commitment to this project going ahead, and a very large amount of work has been put in place to ensure that it can go ahead. I'm certainly not aware from the briefing material that I've received that Defence has any intention of walking away from this project, and in fact, as I've indicated in my previous answer, Defence remains fully committed to this project going ahead. Having said that, unfortunately, the land title issues that have bogged down this process are a matter for the Tasmanian Government and the University to resolve. They're not entirely within Defence's remit to sort them out and to get this project happening, but Defence is working closely and will continue to work closely with those partners to ensure that the project goes ahead.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. I understand a yes-no is tricky. It's clear that the Department of Defence sees UTAS as the problem child in this land transfer issue, which I sort of agree with. Will UTAS face any consequences from the government for putting their own interests ahead of this important project for the Launceston community?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Again, I've certainly seen nothing come before me that would suggest that this is entirely the responsibility of UTAS. I don't have the background to this project to know myself whether that's the case or not, and I'm certainly not aware of any plan to impose some kind of penalty on UTAS in relation to this project not having yet commenced. All I can say is that the Department of Defence and the government as a whole remains committed to the project going ahead. We call on the Tasmanian Government and UTAS to resolve these issues, and we stand ready to assist in any way that we can.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Billick.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Gallagher. From July 1, the Albanese Labor government is delivering a tax cut to every Australian taxpayer, which is designed to help address the continued cost of living pressures Australians are facing. This will mean that working Australians will keep more of what they earn. Why is it important that the government's plan is delivered, and how will it provide tangible relief to Australian households who are doing it tough?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Bilyk for the question and for her advocacy for the people of the great state of Tasmania, where she comes from. From July 1 this year, the Albanese Labor government will deliver a tax cut for every Australian taxpayer, 13.9 million people. Our tax cuts will deliver a bigger tax cut for Middle Australia to help ease with the cost of living. The Albanese government is responding to the pressures that Australians are under here and now, and under our plan, more Australians will get a tax cut and more Australians will get a bigger tax cut. In relation to Senator Bilyk's state of Tasmania, every taxpayer in Tasmania will receive a tax cut, all 280,000 Tasmanian taxpayers. 260,000 of those taxpayers will receive a bigger tax cut under the government's tax cut policy, and 140,000 Tasmanian women will get a tax cut, President, and 130,000 of these women will get a bigger tax cut than they would have under the former government's proposal. Nurses, teachers, truckies are some of the most likely to benefit, with more than 95% of those taxpayers getting a bigger tax cut. A person on an average income of around $73,000 will get a tax cut of $1,504, $804 more than they were going to get under the Liberal and National plan. A person earning $40,000 will get a tax cut of $654, compared with nothing under the Liberals and Nationals plan. And a person earning $100,000 will get a tax cut of $2,179, $804 more than they would have received under those opposite. For a family on an average household income, they will receive $2,600, which is about $50 per week, and $1,600 more than they would have received under the old plan.
Has expired. Senator Bilyk, first supplementary.
Thank you, and thank you, Minister. We know that Australians living in the regions face unique challenges and cost pressure associated with distance. Can you outline how the Albanese Labor government is committed to supporting these many and varied regional communities, and how Labor's tax cut plan will benefit regional Australians?
Thank you, Senator Bilyk. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much, President. The Albanese Labor government's tax cuts overwhelmingly support regional Australians. For example, 86% of taxpayers in Western New South Wales will get a bigger tax cut under Labor's plan from July 1. In far north Queensland, 87% of taxpayers will get a bigger tax cut. In regional Victoria, 87% of taxpayers will get a bigger tax cut. The vitally important workers of nurses, teachers, retail assistants, labourers, truckies, agricultural workers that live in regional Australia are some of the most likely to benefit. We recognise the contribution of these workers to our nation and to their local communities. Around 1.2 million people in Western Australia will get a bigger tax cut on the 1st of July under Labor's new tax cuts plan than under the former government's. Around 100,000 people in the NT will get a bigger tax cut on the 1st of July. And I'm going to run out of time, President, but I've got more to come.
Minister, the time has expired. Senator Bilyk, second supplementary.
Don't worry about running out of time, Minister. I've got a second supplementary. Why is Labor's tax cut plan superior for Australians living in regional Australia, and how will they be better off from July 1 when compared to the Morrison government's plan?
Thank you, Senator Bilyk. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much. Where I left off, President, in the Hunter, 250,000 taxpayers will be better off under Labor's new tax cut plan, with the region receiving an average tax cut of $1,564. In regional Victoria, 370,000 taxpayers will be better off under Labor's new tax cuts plan, with the region receiving an average tax cut of $1,467. In central Queensland, 113,000 taxpayers will be better off under Labor's new tax cut plan, with the region receiving an average tax cut of $1,721. Providing our food, getting our goods to our doors, supporting a good quality of life. I don't know why those opposite hate hearing about people getting a tax cut. They really, for tax cuts they support, they're very vocal, when they're hearing all of this good news about the investments and support going to regional Australians through tax cuts?
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKenzie.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Gallagher. The auto industry have released modelling to show Labor's family car tax on SUVs, four-wheel drives and utes could impose penalties of up to $25,000 on the cost of a new car. For example, the RAV4 would be slugged up to $11,000 under Labor's car tax, and the Ford Ranger ute by nearly $18,000. During the middle of a cost-of-living crisis and high inflation, why is the government trying to force Australians who want or need an SUV or a four-wheel drive to pay more when buying their next family car?
Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. Well, I must say there isn't a policy area where, with a fear campaign that the Liberal National Party don't want to jump on board of and promote. Instead of working in the national interest, it's always about the scare campaign. It's always about misinformation. It's always about trying to drive fear and disunity against the need to make progress in relation to climate change. And they will jump on everything they can and perpetuate these myths. We are currently, for the record, we are currently consulting on a new vehicle efficiency standard. And I might just use, here's a quote, "We've always been committed to getting fuel efficiency standards in place." Who might have said that? Who might have said that? Oh, Josh Frydenberg, Treasurer. April 2022. Oh, here's another one. Here's another one. Let's play this game. Guess who said this? When fuel efficiency standards were introduced in the US...
Order. Please resume your seat. Order. Order. I'm waiting for order. Senator McKenzie.
Point of order, Madam President, on relevance. I asked not about the fuel efficiency standard itself, but the industry modelling that says the cost of new family cars will be increased by significant amounts. Is industry right or not?
Thank you, Senator McKenzie. I will draw the minister back to your question. Minister Gallagher.
Just providing some context to that, President, and I will come to the question. When fuel efficiency standards were introduced in the US, the most popular models before introduction stayed the most popular models after. What we'd call utes, there wasn't a material change in price, and we don't expect there would be a material change in price here. That goes directly to your question. Who said it? Who said it? The member for Bradfield. What happened to him? When those opposite used to believe in fuel efficiency
Gallagher,
standards.
please resume your seat. Order. Order. Senator McKenzie.
On direct relevance, Madam President, you did rule the minister has gone nowhere near the cost increases on new cars that industry has made
McKenzie,
clear.
The minister is being directly relevant to your question. Minister, please continue.
Straight to that issue of price, Madam President, and here's another one. Well, we are adopting increasing fuel efficiency standard, and that's a good thing. I don't have a problem with that. We should be doing that, and the fleet should be progressively getting cleaner and lower intensity of emissions. Now, who might have said that? Was it someone on this side?
Hello, Dave.
It was Senator Sharma. Senator Sharma in February. Good on you, Senator Sharma. Making sense.
That's a good thing.
Actually talking
Senator Watt.
and responding to the challenges, not just
you,
jumping
Minister.
on that fear campaign.
Has expired. Senator McKenzie, first supplementary.
Thank you. Under Labor's proposed family car tax on SUVs, four-wheel drives and utes, the government proposes manufacturers of cars with high carbon emissions can purchase credits from manufacturers of EVs and low-emissions cars. Minister, isn't it true that under Labor's proposed models there will be winners and losers, and the major beneficiaries who will reap the windfall will be Elon Musk's Tesla and the Chinese EV makers?
Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Minister Gallagher.
Well,
Senator McKenzie, you've asked your question.
We are consulting on a policy now. We have three options and feedback is being provided, and we've taken some of your feedback today, Senator McKenzie, until the 4th of March. But I would say, what is the Australia stands alone. Obviously, we've been left by 10 years of inaction from your government, despite people supporting it. What's the other country that doesn't have, developed country that doesn't have fuel efficiency standards? What is it? Oh, it's a country led by Vladimir Putin.
Hello, Vladimir.
Russia.
Hello,
Russia. So what have you got against us trying to put in place standards that drive down the cost of fuel, make cars more efficient and ensure that people are paying less for the running of their cars? What does the National Party have against more efficiency and lower cost for people when running their cars? They're currently paying too much and they shouldn't be.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McKenzie.
Minister, if the government's intention is to reduce carbon emissions in the vehicle fleet, why does the government's policy propose to punish popular hybrid cars like the RAV4, the Corolla and the Yaris with carbon penalties?
Thank you, Senator McKenzie. Minister Gallagher.
This is not about punishing particular vehicles.
Minister Gallagher, please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie, you've asked your question. Minister Gallagher, please continue.
This is about putting in place a new vehicle standard that will allow Australians to have more choice and pay less for fuel. And today, Toyota has announced they're launching a fully new electric SUV. There we go, the BZ4X today. We welcome more choice for Australian consumers. Of course, if you want a petrol SUV, you will still be able to buy one, and that we will continue on working on the case with a fuel efficiency standard. But I say to the Liberal and National Party, stop the scare campaign. For once, act in the interests of consumers in this country, about getting access to choice, about driving better vehicles into this country, about encouraging greater fuel efficiency and lowering costs for drivers in this country. You should be getting behind this standard, just like Mr Fletcher, Senator Sharma and your former Treasurer,
thank you, Minister.
Mr.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Pratt.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Industry and Science, Minister Watt. The Albanese government went to the election promising to rebuild Australia's manufacturing capability and deliver a future made in Australia. We know this vision for our nation cannot be achieved without a safe and well-paid workforce. What will be the impact of Labor's tax cuts on Australian workers in the manufacturing industry?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Pratt, who I know has had a very long history of supporting the manufacturing industry and manufacturing workers in this country. And unlike those opposite, Senator Pratt and everyone on this side of the chamber believes in Australian manufacturing. We don't go around shutting down car industries and shutting down the manufacturing industry. We actually support manufacturing, and they don't like being reminded of closing down the car industry.
Order. Minister Watt. Order. Minister Gallagher.
Point of order. I was just going to say the interjections from those opposite are making it difficult to hear Senator Watt.
They are indeed, and I would again remind senators that they are to listen in respectful silence. Minister Watt, Senator McKenzie, I've just called the chamber to order. I've asked for respectful silence. I don't want the interjections to continue. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Geez, aren't they touchy about their history of closing down the car industry? We always know the things you don't want to talk about because it wakes you from your slumber and you start deciding to become a viable, human entity again. Well, unlike all of you opposite, Senator Pratt believes in a future made in Australia, and so does everyone over this side of the chamber. And unlike those opposite who drove car manufacturing into the ground—
Please resume your seat. Senator Henderson and Senator Rennick, you are out of order, seriously, both of you. Yelling and pointing across the chamber, Senator Henderson, is disrespectful. And yelling out at the top of your voice, Senator Rennick, is also disrespectful. I ask people to listen in respectful silence. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thank you, President. As I was saying, unlike those opposite who drove car manufacturing into the ground, we are taking action to help Australian business to grow, and we're making sure that manufacturing workers prosper at the same time. That's why we're taking such action on cost of living pressures, and we're improving job security, and that is why we are giving Australian manufacturing workers a tax cut. What does it mean in practice? Well, Senator Pratt, you'd be aware, I'm sure you've had a Bundaberg ginger beer over the years. Let's look at, and it's a business that I know Senator Chisholm as well is very familiar with in my state of Queensland, an entry-level worker at the Bundaberg production line or in the brew house or in the warehouse, the people who make the magic happen, they make around $50,000 a year. With Labor's tax cuts, a worker at that plant will be $955 a year better off. Now, those opposite have been happy to accuse the government of stifling ambition, of not believing in aspiration, of discouraging workers from improving their lot in life. Well, if that worker at Bundaberg gains the experience to get an even higher paid job at $65,000 a year, they'll be over $1,300 a year better off as a result of Labor's tax cuts.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pratt, first supplementary.
Thank you. From metal workers to food processors, we know that manufacturing workers play a critical role in the day-to-day lives of all Australians. So how will Labor's tax cuts ensure all manufacturing workers are able to keep more of what they earn, and why is this so important?
Thank you, Senator Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you again, Senator Pratt. As we've indicated repeatedly, Labor stands for manufacturing workers and all workers to earn more and keep more of what they earn. And I'm very pleased to inform Senator Pratt that it isn't just food and beverage manufacturing workers who will benefit from Labor's tax cuts. It is all manufacturing workers in my state of Queensland, in Senator Pratt's state of Queensland and everywhere else around Australia. To give you another example, workers at Capral Aluminium in Bremer, near Ipswich in Queensland, who work at the biggest aluminium extrusion plant in Australia, making aluminium products for use as windows, doors, ute trays and much, much more, they will also benefit from Labor's tax cuts. A full-time entry-level production worker at Bremer at the Capral plant currently makes around $52,000 a year, and they'll enjoy more than $1,000 from Labor's tax cuts. And with a pay rise through gaining extra expertise, earning up to $73,000, they will get more than $1,500 a year from Labor's tax cuts.
Thank you,
Our
Minister.
tax cuts are good for workers in manufacturing.
Senator Pratt, second supplementary.
Thank you. When Labor's tax cut policy was announced, and without even seeing the details, those opposite promised to fight this legislation through the House of Representatives and the Senate, saying we're not prepared to give up on this. So, Minister, why is it so important that manufacturing workers benefit from Labor's tax cuts?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Well, again, manufacturing workers had to suffer too long under a coalition government, in fact 10 years too long, seeing that industry wound down, seeing their wages suppressed, seeing their jobs become more insecure, and that is changing under the Labor Party. Manufacturing workers are finally getting the respect they deserve, and now they will be better off thanks to Labor's tax cuts. But that isn't all that we've been doing in this space since coming to government. Across the manufacturing industry, workers are earning more since Labor came to government. The average full-time earnings for manufacturing workers since Labor came to office are up by $145 a week. There are also more manufacturing workers since Labor came to power, more than 85,000 additional secure, well-paid jobs in manufacturing, many of them in outer suburban and regional communities. And thanks to Labor's tax cuts, a worker earning the average full-time manufacturing wage will be nearly $1,900 better off. Under Labor, you'll earn more and keep more of what you earn.
The time for answering has expired. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I ask that all further questions be placed on the notice paper.